spent with you. So here I am to worship, here I am to bow down, here I am to say that you're my God. You're altogether lovely, altogether worthy.
On the overhead, you can see that we're going to be talking about something that's going to be happening on the 26th of this month. It's amazing that every 4 years, nations can come together in a celebration of excellence. Of excellence. And you know, it's kind of consistent with what the Bible teaches, because the Bible does talk about excellence. But it doesn't talk about waiting 4 years. But it does talk about excellence. On the overhead, you can see a quote that's from John Wooden. Material possessions, winning scores, and great reputations are meaningless in the eyes of the Lord, because he knows what really are, that is all that matters. Now, John Wooden, for those of you that are familiar with club basketball, I refuse to call it by its proper name, but I will just today. UCLA. When I go to the top of the hill, I see LA all the time. But he had some great players. Lou Alcindor and Bill Walton. Bill Walton sat in our living room. He was playing for the Portland Trailblazers at the time. But John Wooden had greatness. Greatness that played for him. And he kept insisting that true greatness, true excellence, has to be what's seen in the eyes of the Lord. And indeed, we echo that. But notice, as we look at these games, back in 1 Samuel 20:20, I will shoot 3 arrows to the side as though I shot at a target. As far back as in Samuel, there was talks about sporting events, gathering together. And you look throughout the Old Testament, you see that people of the Old Testament did engage in various games, sports, acts of leisure, telling of riddles, puzzles that needed to be figured out by others. Samson did at his wedding. He told a puzzle, a riddle, and then unfortunately placed a bet on it. And ultimately he lost, because his wife that he had just married, she had pressed him hard, and he finally told her the answer. She went to her relatives and ratted him out, to which Samson paid. But he also said, had you not plowed with my heifer, you never would have found out the riddle. Paul in 1 Corinthians, he talks about the games, the precursor of what we have going on now with the Olympics. Everyone who competes in the games exercises self-control in all things. They then do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we for an imperishable. Paul understood it. Paul said, I know of which I talk. And he later on in that same chapter, He said, I box as not without aim. He was aware of competition and spiritual examples can be learned in this regards. And there is a crown, but it is a crown far greater than any Olympic crown. And do you realize that a gold medal is not solid gold? It's not. It's gold plate. Now, I don't know what the inert metal is, but it's not solid gold. And do you hear what people say? If they don't win gold, they'd much rather win bronze than silver, because silver means they got just tick, tick, that close to winning, and they just didn't have it. So let me win bronze or let me win gold, but don't stick me with silver. Kind of harsh, isn't it? Well, whenever you enter into a contest, you have to figure out, is it really worth it? Is it worth everything I'm going to put it through? Keith and Isaiah play basket hoops. I refuse to call it basketball, but they play basket hoops. And they train for it. Are you guys still playing? Okay. Try baseball. No. But you train for it. One of the reasons I don't like basketball is because we kept having to run faster and faster up and down the court. And I went, there's no point in this. And when I started dogging it, the coach made me run more. And I go, why? The only thing you put me in for is so I'll foul people. Run. But you train. So Paul talks about, but I buffet my body daily. By buffet, I actually like the word the way I look at it, buffet. But he talks about, but I buffet my body. He means to literally strike it under the eye. I beat it to the point that I'll continue on with my training. And I make it my slave so that after I have preached to others, I myself might not be disqualified. I want to press on. And I know that in order for me to win, I need the training. Now, Paul's talking about the spiritual context, but he's using the physical analogy of the games to make the point. And so he's saying, you know what? You got to figure out, is the cost worth it? Is it worth it? Is the prize worth what I'm putting my body through? And I think back when I was doing sports, whether it was football or baseball or occasionally basket hoops. I did run track for a little bit. I hated that because then you got to run. But I could run 220 yards perfectly. Could run 100 perfectly. 221 yards, nope. But I was a sprinter. And so I knew I could do that. And I go, well, training for football, is it worth it? What am I going to get out of it? Am I going to go to the NFL? No. So why do I train myself? Was it fun? And I had to sit back and calculate that. Was it fun? Yeah, I suppose for a while it was fun. Then it wasn't fun anymore. Well, what about baseball? Was it fun? Yeah. Was I going to go to the major leagues? Yeah, I probably would have. Probably would have. And then when I was talked to by a scout from a major league team, oh, then everything got to be much more intense. I'm going to go. I'm going to make it. And they talked to me. They said, here's how much. And I went, no. So they kicked it up a little bit. We want you to go to Wisconsin. And I went, no. And they came back and said, okay, no. That was my flash of fame. And I quit playing for a few years. Then I realized I'm never going to play professional. So what do I do it for? Do I do it for enjoyment? Yes. And I realized that in all that, I had to have a mindset. Now I translate that over to spiritual. For the mindset on the spirit is life and peace. That's what Paul talks about in Romans 8 and verse 6. Jesus talks about consider the cost of discipleship. He said, you've got to stand back and you've got to say, is it worth it? So when I was doing the sports, is it worth the time? Is it worth the energy? For a while it was. Then I translated that over to spiritual because I stumbled upon 1 Corinthians 9. And I thank Paul that he put it in that way. I'm gonna compete spiritually in such a way that I may win. And I've got to think that way, that I just may win. Which means that I've got to be fully resolved, fully determined in all things. Will I win? Not if I don't think I will. But I have got to run, I've got to compete in such a way that I may win. That's got to be in my brain. When Adam played Little League, I was the Little League coach for them. And I told the little guys, I said, every time you get up, it's a battle. Do not let the pitcher win. Don't let him win. They looked at me like, what? You're crazy. I said, when you get 2 strikes, just put the bat on the ball. Foul it off. Foul it off. Foul it off until you get 1 to hit. I remember one game, and Adam was up, fouling them off, fouling them off, fouling them off. Then he got a pitch he could hit. And he broke some guy's window. Guy came up, way down. Adam hit it out, way out. The guy came up and he goes, who hit that ball? My son. Wow, what a hit. Are you insured? Yeah, don't worry about it. But you know, that's what you got to do in life, spiritually. You can't let him win. Who's him? Satan. Talked about him in class this morning a lot. And you can't let him win. You've got to be resolved. You've got to be resolved that you will win. And you will win because Christ is on your side. In Christ, we are more than conquerors. More than conquerors. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. I can. I'm committed to excellence. I may be old and feeble. I looked at my hand last night, had cataracts removed. I can see everything like I said. But I looked at my hand and went, dude, there's an old man's hand on me. Get it off. Adam's sitting over there, Dad, you've had an old man's hand forever. And I can look at myself and realize I'm no longer the svelte sports figure I once was. But I carry that mentality with me into the spiritual arena because I want to win that crown. I want to win the prize. And so I compete with that in my mind. I will win. I will. I won't be like the Houston Astros, and I won't cheat to win. I won't be like the Boston Red Sox who cheated to beat the Dodgers. I will not cheat, but I will use everything at my disposal to win. And what's at my disposal is the Word of God. We are more than conquerors through Christ who loved us. That's what we're going to say to all these things. Turn over to Romans, the 8th chapter. And you probably think I haven't been using the Bible during this sermon, been quoting directly from it. But now I'll read from it. Romans 8 and verse 31. What shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who is against us? In 4 years, the Olympics are going to come back to LA and back to the United States and LA in particular. And the fanfare is going to be played. And the United States team is going to walk in. And they're going to walk in with confidence. Because after all, it is the United States team. And in the Summer Olympics, the United States team, more often than not, wins the most medals. We are the United States. So take that physical, put it over to Christians. We walk with confidence because God is with us. Drop down to verse 37. But in all these things, we overwhelmingly conquer through him who loved us. We've been trained in righteousness. 2 Timothy 3:16. Hebrews the 12th chapter, verses 1 and 2. Are we willing to run with endurance? Let's actually read that. I thought I had it etched in my mind, and I thought it was there. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, the writer then goes on to say, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of the faith. Then he goes on to say, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Now, I don't know about you, but I watched a little bit about the Olympic trials. And they were at Hayward Field. Hayward Field is on the campus of the University of Oregon. It's been modified since the days I went there. But the runners, they would lay aside every encumbrance. They would get ready for the race set before them. They'd get into their starting position. The gun would go off. And in a blur, they blasted down the track. Because they've been trained in righteousness. They'd done everything. And they had respect for rule and authority. Last week, Sunday afternoon, we talked about how Paul said to Timothy, you're like an athlete. And an athlete knows the rules. And you compete according to the rules. That's why I said, no cheating like the Astros or the Red Sox. It's what it takes. You got to cheat to beat the Dodgers. Imagine that. But you're willing to embrace any obstacle. You put on the new man and you embrace it and you go forward. Now, if you come up short, and see, I did this on purpose. I whined about the Astros and the Red Sox. Unfortunately, the Dodgers lost in 2018, 2017. I would not say to the better team in either instance. Nevertheless, they lost. And they have to own that. And if you don't make it to heaven, you have to own that as well. It's not going to be my fault. It's going to be your fault. And if I don't make it to heaven, then sure, why not? It's going to be your fault. I thought I'd at least get a ha-ha, chuckle, chuckle. No. Individually, we stand or fall. It's each one of our faults. We stand or we fall. We press forward to the goal. Philippians, the 3rd chapter. Leaving behind what's behind. I press forward, reaching ever toward the goal. That's Philippians 3, verses 12, 13, 14. And ultimately, Paul writes as the time of his life comes to an end. He writes and says to young Timothy, who he views as his son, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept the faith. In the future, there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing. That's what I plan to have happen to me. When I depart from this life, to have competed in such a way spiritually that I would not be denied. That victory is going to be mine. Mine. And I will embrace it. I will accept it. And I will thank God for his mercy, his love, and his grace. And that's up to each and every one of us. We have to have that same mindset going forward. Paul was masterful when he wrote the various letters, when he talked about the games, because the games were an important part of life back in the 1st century. And so he put out something people could relate to. Most of you follow a sport. Follow a sport. And you understand it. I've been trying for 50 some odd years to get Linda to understand football, to like baseball. Basketball, don't even mention it to her. Hockey, no. Roller derby, no. She just doesn't like sports. Maybe some of the Olympics. The relatability is there. But that's what Paul did. And so, figure out a way to make it relate to you so that you commit yourself to excellence in order to realize the prize that awaits and run, compete, be involved in such a way that you may win. The lesson is yours this morning.